Three's Company was America's favorite sex comedy that never actually showed sex. Behind the pratfalls and misunderstandings, contracts were torn up, stars walked off set, and one actor's ego nearly destroyed everything. These are 20 secrets about Three's Company hidden for decades. Number 20, the show was stolen. From a British sitcom, almost scene for scene.
Okay, Chrissy, I'll get in the tub with you, then we can get it on.
Three's Company wasn't an original American creation. It was a direct copy of the British sitcom Man About the House that aired from 1973 to 1976. American producer Ted Bergman saw the British show during a trip to England and immediately recognized its potential for American audiences if the sexual content was toned down slightly. He purchased the rights and hired writers to adapt it. But adaptation meant copying the premise, character dynamics, and even specific plot points almost identically. The British Shista featured 2 women and 1 man sharing a flat with sexual tension and misunderstandings driving the comedy, exactly what Three's Company would become. American network executives loved the formula because it had already proven successful overseas, removing the risk of developing something genuinely original. The British creators received payment and credit, but watched as American television essentially remade their show with bigger budgets and wider distribution. Three's Company became a massive hit, while Man About the House remained relatively unknown in America, a pattern that would repeat throughout television history. The theft wasn't technically illegal since rights were purchased, but it demonstrated American television's preference for borrowing proven concepts rather than taking creative risks with original ideas. Number 19, Suzanne Summers, was the 4th choice for the role of Chrissy. Suzanne Summers wasn't the 1st, 2nd, or even 3rd choice to play Chrissy Snow. The producers wanted an established actress with comedy experience who could handle physical humor and deliver dumb blonde jokes without making the character completely insufferable. They auditioned dozens of actresses before reluctantly considering Summers, who'd been doing minor television roles and commercials without breaking through. Network executives thought she was too beautiful and not funny enough, worried that audiences would reject a character who looked like a model but acted like a child. But Summers brought unexpected warmth to Chrissy, playing her innocence as genuine rather than performed, making the character lovable instead of annoying. Her audition wasn't particularly strong technically, but she had something intangible that the other actresses lacked, a vulnerability that made you want to protect Chrissy rather than mock her. The producers took a chance despite network reservations, and Summers proved them right immediately. She understood instinctively how to make physical comedy look effortless, taking pratfalls and delivering malapropisms with perfect timing. Her chemistry with John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt was instant, creating the dynamic that would define the show for years. Casting Summers became one of those happy accidents where the risky choice turned out to be the only choice that could have worked. Number 18. John Ritter was trained in physical comedy by real vaudeville performers.
Come and knock on our door. Come and knock on our door.
John Ritter didn't learn physical comedy from television or film. He learned from actual vaudeville performers who'd worked the stage decades earlier. His father, country singer Tex Ritter, had connections to old entertainment circles, and John sought out aging performers who could teach him the craft properly. He studied timing, how to fall without getting hurt, how to make reactions bigger for cameras without becoming cartoonish. Ritter approached physical comedy as a serious discipline, requiring training and practice, not just natural ability or willingness to look foolish. He watched silent film comedians obsessively, analyzing how Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton used their bodies to generate laughs without dialogue. That education made him the perfect Jack Tripper, able to execute elaborate physical gags that looked spontaneous but were actually precisely choreographed. Ritter's commitment to physical comedy elevated Three's Company above typical sitcom fare, with his pratfalls and reactions becoming as important as the scripts themselves. He took comedy seriously in a way that most television actors didn't, understanding that making something look easy required enormous skill and preparation. His training allowed him to perform stunts that other actors couldn't or wouldn't attempt, giving the show a physical dynamism that separated it from competitors. Ritter's vaudeville education became Three's Company's secret weapon, the foundation that everything else built upon. Number 17. The gay pretense was considered too controversial for network television. The show's central premise, that Jack had to pretend to be gay so the landlord would allow him to live with two women, was nearly rejected by ABC as too controversial for mainstream audiences. Network executives in 1977 were terrified of anything touching homosexuality, even in comedy form, worried about backlash from conservative viewers and advertisers. They demanded changes that would eliminate or minimize the gay pretense, suggesting alternative explanations for why Jack could live with Janet and Chrissy. The producers refused to budge, arguing that the premise was essential to the show's comedy, and that removing it would destroy the entire concept. They pointed to the British original's success with the same premise as proof that audiences could handle it. Eventually, ABC relented, but imposed strict rules about how the gay pretense could be portrayed, insisting it always be played for harmless comedy, without any actual exploration of homosexuality. Jack had to be obviously straight to viewers while pretending to be gay for the landlord, a delicate balance that required careful writing and performance. The compromise satisfied no one completely but allowed the show to exist. Gay rights organizations criticized the show for making homosexuality a punchline, while conservative groups protested its mere existence. The controversy generated publicity that helped launch the show, proving that sometimes the thing networks fear most is exactly what audiences want to see. Number 16. Joyce DeWitt was paid significantly less than her co-stars, despite equal work. Joyce DeWitt, who played Janet Wood, discovered midway through the show's run that she was being paid considerably less than John Ritter and Suzanne Summers, despite working identical hours and carrying equal weight in storylines. The pay disparity wasn't accidental. It reflected the industry's standard practice of paying women less than men, and valuing actresses based on perceived sex appeal rather than talent or importance to the show. DeWitt's agents had negotiated what seemed like fair compensation initially, but as the show became a hit, Ritter and Summers received substantial raises while DeWitt's salary remained relatively stagnant. She didn't discover the full extent of the inequality until Suzanne Summers' very public contract dispute made everyone's salaries public knowledge. DeWitt was hurt and angry, but chose not to make a public fight out of it, worried that being labeled difficult would destroy her career. She negotiated privately for better terms, but never achieved true parity with her male co-star. The situation exemplified how women in television were expected to accept less while being grateful for opportunities that male actors took for granted. DeWitt's quieter approach to the pay gap contrasted sharply with Summers' aggressive public battle, demonstrating two different strategies for addressing the same injustice. Neither approach fully succeeded, revealing how deeply embedded gender discrimination was in Hollywood's economic structure during that era. Number 15. Suzanne Summers demanded equal pay to John Ritter and was fired for it. In 1980, after 3 successful seasons, Suzanne Summers demanded a raise from $30,000 per episode to $150,000, equal to what John Ritter was earning. She argued that Chrissy was as popular as Jack, that she did equal work, and that gender shouldn't determine compensation when contribution was identical. The producers and network refused immediately, calling her demands outrageous and threatening to fire her if she didn't back down. Summers stood firm, believing her popularity and the show's success gave her leverage to demand fair treatment. The standoff became vicious, with producers leaking stories portraying Summers as greedy and ungrateful, while she fought back through media appearances explaining her position. ABC ultimately fired her, reducing her to brief phone call appearances for the remainder of her contract before writing Chrissy off completely. The network replaced her with Jenna Lee Harrison playing Chrissy's cousin Cindy, then later with Priscilla Barnes as Terry, neither of whom demanded equal pay or caused problems. Summers' firing sent a clear message to actresses industry-wide that demanding equal pay would cost you your career regardless of your value or popularity. The battle destroyed Summers' relationship with her former co-stars and blacklisted her from major network television for years. Her stand became legendary as both courageous and cautionary, admired for principle, but cited as proof that fighting the system resulted in punishment rather than justice. Number 14. John Ritter refused to support Suzanne Summers. During her contract fight, John Ritter, who'd been friendly with Suzanne Summers and claimed to support equal pay in principle, refused to publicly support her during the contract dispute that ended her career on Three's Company. Summers had expected Ritter to use his leverage as the show's male lead to advocate for her, believing their friendship and his progressive values would compel him to speak up. Instead, Ritter remained silent, continuing to work while Summers fought alone. His silence felt like betrayal to Summers, particularly since his own high salary was part of what made the pay gap so stark. Ritter later claimed he'd been advised by his agents and lawyers to stay out of the conflict, that getting involved would jeopardize his own position and wouldn't help Summers anyway. But his refusal to support her revealed the limits of his advocacy when it might cost him personally. The incident damaged their friendship permanently, with Summers expressing hurt and disappointment in interviews for years afterward. Ritter's silence also contradicted his public image as a nice guy who cared about fairness and equality, showing that progressive values often disappeared when they conflicted with career interests. The dynamic between them exemplified how men in Hollywood could express support for women's equality, abstractly, while refusing to take risks or sacrifice anything when actual opportunities for solidarity arose. Number 13. The apartment set was so small. Actors constantly injured themselves.
Why did you quit your job at the hospital? I thought you liked nursing.
The main apartment set where most of Three's Company took place was significantly smaller than it appeared on television, with tight quarters causing constant problems during filming. The cramped space was designed to look spacious through camera angles and lighting, but actors had only narrow pathways to move through during takes. John Ritter's physical comedy required room to execute pratfalls and elaborate sight gags, but the set's limitations meant he was constantly bruising himself on furniture corners and bumping into walls just off camera. The small size also created problems for camera operators and crew, who had to squeeze equipment into spaces barely large enough for the actors themselves. Production designers had prioritized creating a living room and kitchen that looked good on camera over practical considerations about how people would work in the space daily. The apartment's famous couch became a hazard, positioned so close to other furniture that actors had to carefully choreograph sitting down to avoid collisions. Multiple cast members twisted ankles navigating the cramped quarters, and John Ritter suffered a concussion after mistiming a pratfall and hitting the kitchen counter. The set's design flaws were accepted as necessary compromises for visual appeal, with everyone understanding that making television meant adapting to less than ideal working conditions. But the constant injuries took a toll physically and mentally, adding stress to an already demanding production schedule. Number 12. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley were tricked into leaving for a spin-off. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley, who played landlords Stanley and Helen Roper, were convinced to leave Three's Company for their own spin-off called The Ropers, with promises that turned out to be false. Producers told them the spin-off was guaranteed for multiple seasons and would make them more money and give them creative control they didn't have as supporting players. ABC executives assured them the spin-off would receive full promotional support and premium time slots. Fell and Lindley trusted these promises and left Three's Company after 3 seasons, excited about finally being leads rather than supporting characters. The Ropers premiered in 1979 and was canceled after 1.5 seasons with poor ratings and minimal network support. The promised creative control never materialized, with network executives dictating storylines and micromanaging production. Fell and Lindley realized they'd been manipulated, moved off Three's Company, so the show could introduce new landlord characters without the complication of expensive contract renegotiations. They'd been expendable despite their popularity, sacrificed for cost savings, disguised as career opportunities. Both actors tried returning to Three's Company after The Ropers ended, but they'd been replaced by Don Knotts as Ralph Furley and weren't wanted back. The experience left them bitter about Hollywood and wary of producer promises, having learned the hard way that loyalty and success meant nothing when business considerations dictated different decisions. Number 11. Don Knotts joined the show, specifically to boost our ratings. After cast changes,
Tub with you, then we can get it on.
Don Knotts was brought onto Three's Company in 1979 as the new landlord Ralph Furley, specifically to stabilize ratings after Suzanne Somers' departure and the Ropers' exit to their spin-off. The network knew that losing multiple popular characters in quick succession could destroy the show, so they needed a replacement with immediate credibility and audience recognition. Knotts was a television legend from The Andy Griffith Show, and his addition was calculated to bring nostalgic older viewers while maintaining the younger audience. His character was intentionally written as completely different from Stanley Roper, a swinging bachelor landlord who thought he was cool but was actually pathetic, giving Knotts room to do his trademark nervous energy comedy. The strategy worked brilliantly, with Knotts bringing physical comedy that complemented John Ritter perfectly while adding his own distinct style. His presence also helped mask Suzanne Somers' absence by shifting the show's dynamic and giving audiences something new to focus on. Knotts was professional and undemanding, the opposite of Somers, which made producers appreciate him even more as a safe, reliable presence. His addition extended the show's life by several seasons, proving that sometimes replacing popular actors with even bigger stars can work if done strategically. But it also reinforced that actors were interchangeable pieces in a machine designed to generate profit, valuable only until they became problems. Number 10. The show's sexual innuendo was carefully scripted to avoid censorship. Three's Company's reputation for sexual innuendo wasn't accidental improvisation. It was meticulously scripted and edited to push boundaries without crossing lines that would trigger network censors. Writers developed an elaborate system of double entendres that sounded innocent on paper, but landed dirty in performance, giving them plausible deniability if censors objected. Every script went through multiple reviews, with writers anticipating what censors might flag, and crafting language that technically meant something wholesome, while clearly implying something sexual. The show operated in constant tension with standards and practices, the network department responsible for ensuring content met broadcast regulations. Censors watched rehearsals and demanded changes, forcing writers to find creative alternatives that achieved the same effect through different wording or physical comedy instead of dialogue. John Ritter became an expert at selling innocent lines as dirty through timing and facial expressions, making censors' jobs nearly impossible since they couldn't object to how he raised an eyebrow. The cat-and-mouse game with censors was exhausting, but produced the show's signature style, comedy that winked at adult audiences while technically remaining family-friendly. Writers took pride in outsmarting censors, treating each approved innuendo as a small victory against puritanical television standards. The elaborate process demonstrated how much creative energy went into appearing spontaneous and naughty, while actually being carefully controlled and sanitized for broadcast television. Number 9. Joyce DeWitt became isolated from the rest of the cast. Joyce DeWitt's relationships with her co-stars deteriorated over the show's run, leaving her increasingly isolated and unhappy on set. The problems began with Suzanne Somers' contract dispute, where DeWitt sided with producers rather than supporting Somers' demands for equal pay. Somers felt betrayed, and their friendship ended permanently. John Ritter grew distant from DeWitt as well, frustrated by what he perceived as her lack of support for Somers and her unwillingness to rock the boat. The new cast members who replaced Somers didn't bond with DeWitt either, sensing she was standoffish and unwelcoming. DeWitt later claimed she'd been protecting herself and the show, worried that supporting Somers would get her fired too. But her survival strategy came at the cost of genuine relationships with the people she worked with daily. She spent breaks alone in her dressing room, while other cast members socialized, ate meals by herself, and avoided cast gatherings outside of work. The isolation affected her performance and mental health, making her question whether staying on the show was worth the emotional cost. By the final seasons, DeWitt was counting days until the show ended, exhausted from being professional with people who barely spoke to her. Her experience illustrated how workplace conflicts create lasting damage, turning what should have been a dream job into something to endure rather than enjoy. Number 8. The show's theme song was changed because the original was too suggestive. Three's Company's original theme song was deemed too sexually suggestive by network executives and replaced before the show premiered nationally. The first version, used in the pilot and a few early episodes, featured lyrics that more explicitly referenced the living arrangement's sexual possibilities and Jack's gay pretense. ABC censors panicked after screening the pilot, arguing that the theme song set an inappropriate tone that would attract protests from family values organizations. They demanded a complete rewrite, something cheerful and innocent that didn't draw attention to the show's premise. The replacement theme, "Come and Knock on Our Door," was deliberately generic and wholesome, focusing on friendship rather than sex. Lyricist Joe Raposo, who'd written songs for Sesame Street, was hired specifically because his reputation for family-friendly content would provide cover against criticism. The new theme worked perfectly for network purposes, sounding harmless while the actual show content pushed boundaries that the theme song carefully avoided acknowledging. Many viewers never knew about the original theme, accepting the broadcast version as definitive. The change exemplified network television's hypocrisy, selling sex through innuendo and situations while maintaining surface-level innocence through careful image management. The show could be as dirty as possible in content, as long as its packaging suggested wholesome family entertainment, a contradiction that perfectly captured 1970s television. Number 7. John Ritter feuded with producers over his post-show career. During Three's Company's final seasons, John Ritter began feuding with producers over restrictions in his contract that limited his ability to pursue outside projects and prepare for life after the show ended. His contract contained exclusivity clauses that prevented him from accepting film roles or developing his own television projects while Three's Company was in production. Ritter argued that the show was clearly ending soon, and that preventing him from setting up future work was punitive and unnecessary. Producers refused to budge, insisting that contract terms existed for reasons and that making exceptions would set bad precedents. The dispute became bitter, with Ritter threatening to deliberately tank his performance if producers didn't allow him some freedom. He felt trapped in a show that had made him famous, but was now preventing him from capitalizing on that fame to build a sustainable career. The producers eventually compromised, allowing Ritter to take small film roles during hiatus periods, but maintaining most restrictions. The experience left Ritter disillusioned about television, understanding that success didn't guarantee control over your own career or freedom to make choices about your professional future. He became an advocate for actors negotiating better contract terms, warning younger performers to protect their futures rather than accepting short-term money for long-term restrictions. The feud demonstrated how even beloved stars were still employees subject to contract terms designed to benefit producers rather than talent. Number 6. The apartment building exterior was a real location that no longer exists. The iconic exterior shots of the apartment building were filmed at a real location in Santa Monica that was demolished years after the show ended. The building, at 2308 Wilshire Boulevard, served as the establishing shot viewers saw before transitioning to interior sets filmed on sound stages. Producers chose that specific building because its architecture looked appropriately modest for struggling young people while still being visually interesting enough for repeated viewing. The building's owners received payment for filming rights and became minor celebrities in their neighborhood, with fans occasionally showing up trying to visit the apartment from the show. The location became so associated with Three's Company that when the building was slated for demolition in the 2000s, fans mounted an unsuccessful campaign to save it as a cultural landmark. City officials rejected the preservation effort, arguing that the building had no architectural significance beyond its television association. The demolition felt symbolic to longtime fans, physical evidence that the world of Three's Company truly belonged to the past, rather than remaining accessible in the present. The vacant lot that replaced the building became a pilgrimage site for dedicated fans who wanted to stand where the fictional apartment had existed. The location's destruction reinforced how temporary television fame is, how even iconic images eventually disappear when they're no longer economically useful. Number 5. Priscilla Barnes was hired specifically because she wouldn't cause problems.
After all, I do have a reputation to uphold.
Hey, what about me?
When Priscilla Barnes was cast as Terry Alden to replace Suzanne Summers permanently, producers chose her specifically because background checks and industry reputation suggested she would be professional, compliant, and unlikely to demand raises or cause conflicts. Barnes was a working actress who needed the job and understood that she was inheriting a role on a successful show rather than creating something new. Producers made clear during hiring that she was replaceable, that Summers' firing proved no one was indispensable, and that causing any problems would result in immediate termination. Barnes accepted these terms, grateful for steady work and national exposure even under threatening conditions. She was paid less than Summers had been, despite doing identical work, and her contract contained stricter terms, preventing her from negotiating for better conditions. The hiring demonstrated how Summers' stand for equal pay resulted in producers becoming more aggressive about controlling actresses rather than less, using her firing as a warning to future cast members. Barnes performed well and was professional throughout her tenure, but she never had the creative input or respect that Summers had demanded and been punished for seeking. Her experience illustrated how Hollywood responded to actresses asserting themselves by finding more pliable replacements willing to accept worse conditions for the privilege of employment. The producer's strategy worked perfectly from their perspective, proving that standing up for yourself could be punished by ensuring your replacement would be too afraid to try the same thing.
Number 4, the show's cancellation was decided 2 seasons before it actually ended.
All this, I really have to apologize.
No, you don't. Oh, Jack.
ABC decided to cancel Three's Company in 1982, 2 full seasons before the show actually ended in 1984. The network wanted to transition to new programming, targeting younger demographic, and felt the show had become stale after Suzanne Summers' departure and multiple cast changes. But Three's Company was still profitable in syndication, and canceling it immediately would have left the money on the table. So, ABC kept it alive while slowly reducing budgets, cutting episode orders, and worsening time slots to manage its decline rather than abrupt cancellation. The cast and crew operated in limbo, knowing the show was effectively dead, but required to keep producing episodes for financial rather than creative reasons. The final 2 seasons suffered from this death sentence, with writers struggling to generate enthusiasm for storylines that wouldn't matter, and actors going through motions of a show everyone knew was ending. The prolonged cancellation process was worse than immediate termination would have been, creating a depressing work environment where everyone felt they were maintaining a corpse. When cancellation was finally announced officially, it came as relief rather than surprise, ending the pretense that the show had any future. The experience taught everyone involved how networks treated shows as financial assets to be depreciated over time rather than creative endeavors deserving dignified endings when their time came naturally. Number 3. John Ritter died before the cast could properly reconcile season. John Ritter died suddenly in 2003 from an undiagnosed aortic dissection at age 54, taking with him any chance for the Three's Company cast to properly reconcile and make peace with what had happened during the show's run. Ritter had maintained some relationship with Joyce DeWitt, but had never reconciled with Suzanne Summers after the contract dispute that ended her time on the show. They had run into each other occasionally at industry events, exchanging polite greetings, but never having an honest conversation about what had happened and how his silence had hurt her. Summers wanted to tell Ritter that she forgave him and understood the impossible position he'd been in, but she kept waiting for the right moment that never came. His death devastated all his former co-stars, forcing them to confront unfinished business that would remain permanently unfinished. Summers spoke at his memorial service about their complicated friendship, expressing regrets about time wasted on grudges rather than appreciation for what they'd shared. DeWitt mourned privately, processing the loss of someone she'd worked with intimately for years, despite their relationship deteriorating. Ritter's death made it impossible for the surviving cast members to pretend they had unlimited time to fix broken relationships, forcing confrontation with mortality and missed opportunities. The tragedy put the show's conflicts in perspective, making old contract disputes and salary arguments seem trivial compared to the finality of death. Number 2. Suzanne Summers and Joyce DeWitt didn't speak for 30 years.
Suzanne Summers and Joyce DeWitt didn't speak to each other for 30 years after the contract dispute that ended Summers' time on Three's Company. The silence wasn't dramatic. They simply had nothing to say and no reason to communicate. Their friendship completely destroyed by the conflict. DeWitt felt Summers had been selfish and destroyed a good thing through greed, while Summers felt DeWitt had betrayed her by not supporting her fight for equal pay. Both were hurt and angry, and that combination calcified into permanent estrangement. They avoided each other at industry events, declined interview requests about each other, and built separate lives that never intersected. The estrangement lasted until 2012, when they finally met again on Summers' talk show and publicly reconciled. The reunion was emotional, with both women acknowledging how much time they had wasted being angry rather than understanding each other's perspectives. DeWitt apologized for not supporting Summers when she needed it, and Summers apologized for not understanding DeWitt's fear and vulnerable position. The reconciliation didn't erase 30 years of silence, but provided closure neither woman realized they needed. Their reunion became a cultural moment, demonstrating that even decades-old wounds could heal if both parties were willing to be vulnerable and honest. The story also served as a cautionary tale about how Hollywood conflicts destroyed relationships between women who should have been allies rather than enemies. Number 1, the show's legacy is gender inequality. Disguised as a comedy, Three's Company is remembered fondly as a harmless sex comedy, but its legacy is actually a perfect case study in how Hollywood normalized gender inequality and punished women for demanding fair treatment. The show made millions for its network and producers, while paying its actresses significantly less than its male star for equal work. When Suzanne Summers demanded equal pay, she was fired and blacklisted, her career destroyed as a warning to other women. Joyce DeWitt accepted lower pay and was rewarded with continued employment, but no real power or respect. The show's premise relied on treating women as sex objects and homosexuality as a punchline, reinforcing stereotypes that harmed real people. The comedy was built on misogyny, dressed up as misunderstanding, with women constantly portrayed as either ditzy sex objects or nagging shrews. Audiences laughed without recognizing how the show was teaching them that women who demanded equality deserved punishment, and that their primary value was physical attractiveness rather than intelligence or talent. The show's massive success proved that audiences would embrace content that reinforced their prejudices as long as it was packaged as entertainment. Three's Company matters not because it was groundbreaking, but because it perfectly captured an era when sexism was so normalized that nobody questioned centering an entire show around it. The show made money, launched careers, and entertained millions while actively perpetuating the gender inequality that still haunts Hollywood decades later. Three's Company looked like innocent fun, pratfalls and innuendo, and nothing serious. But behind those laughs, women were punished for demanding equality, while men were rewarded for maintaining it. If these secrets change how you see the show, share this story, because some laughter comes at a cost we're still paying.